USA Warrior Stories is a not-for-profit organization designed to record, archive, and share videos of veteran stories, to help veterans make a connection with one another and to help us all better understand their sacrifices for our freedoms.
My name is Jim Spillman. I'm a retired Navy captain, having 24 years of service in the Naval Service, flying helicopters the entire time. I started flying in 1968 in the training command at Pensacola. Like all naval aviators, we started at the same place and do the same things. And we started flying small fixed-wing airplanes until we finished up all our training. It took about 2 years to finish that, from 68 to 70. And when I had just finished carrier qualing in a T-28, they took us all back to Pensacola and said, okay, you guys did a great job. He says, but the needs of the Navy are this, okay? There's 10 of you in the class, 9 of you are going to helicopters, and 1 of you are going to jets. And that's where my career started, in helicopters, right there. So I ended up 1970 going to training in San Diego, HS-10, which is an H-3 training squadron. I was there for almost a year and finished up my qualifications of being a qualified pilot in the H-3, Sikorsky H-3s. They were non-combat ready. They were just strictly a basic helicopter and H-3s. And so I finished that training and reported to NAS at Sugi in 1970. And they said, okay, you ready to go? We're going to send you down to the line. And the line is off North Vietnam on one of the ships. So I had to catch a plane out of Yokota there in Japan. And there was about 2 or 3 of us that went down there together. We landed at Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines, caught a ride. One of our helicopters picked us up there, took us over to NAS QB Point. And we spent a few days there waiting for the ship getting ready to pull out. The line means the Navy's line is a line of ships that take, usually there were 2 to 3 carriers off the coast of North Vietnam at any one time. And usually one arrives, the other one does a pass down to the other carrier, and he goes back to QB Point or goes all the way back to the States. His tour of duty is done. And then incorporated within the 2 to 3 carriers that are out there, you've got small destroyers, cruise ships, smaller decks that operate out there, and that's considered the line. You know, the small decks, large decks. The large decks are the aircraft carriers where the air wings are, and the air wings have obviously several aircraft on board that do different missions. And our responsibility was to, if they get hit, that we're going to go rescue them. That was our job.
In September 1967, Helicopter Combat Support Squadron 7 was commissioned at Atsugi, Japan, as the only combat search and rescue squadron in the United States Navy. The men are known as Sea Devils, with their call signs Big Mother and Clementine. The squadron emblem, Cerberus, the 3-headed dog who guards the gates of Hades, remains as the guardian of mercy for airmen in peril over North Vietnam and the Gulf of Tonkin. The following is a tribute to those men who gave so much so that others might live. The aircraft carrier USS Kitty Hawk operates off the coast of North Vietnam. In the ready rooms, the maps of Vietnam remind us of our area of operations, while in the Combat Information Center, plot boards illuminate the darkened room, giving off an eerie glow. On the flight deck, weapons are readied for an alpha strike against the North Vietnamese forces. 250 and 500-pound bombs, CBUs, Sidewinder missiles, all are loaded on aircraft for the upcoming mission. One by one, aircraft are readied for launch on the catapults. An A-5 Vigilante prepares to launch. Its mission, to photograph the results of the bomb damage after the strike. This plane and its two-man crew will be last off the target, flying at low level, and a sitting duck for the North Vietnamese missiles and ground fire. Once formed up, the aircraft fly overhead en route to the target in the north. These air crews now have the most dangerous mission. Flying deep into enemy territory, they must evade MiG fighters, surface-to-air missiles and anti-aircraft fire, deliver their bombs on target, and then return home safely to the carrier. An HC-7 Big Mother rescue helicopter awaits its turn to land aboard USS Midway as her aircraft return from a mission. The Sea Devils have been at sea around the clock since arriving on Yankee Station, and by the end of the war in 1973, our rescue detachments compiled an incredible record of 2,300 consecutive days, or 6½ years on search and rescue duty.
When I got to the line off the coast, I had been trained to be a combat search and rescue pilot, and that was our mission. When on Det 110 Big Mothers, that was our mission. We are a detachment, okay? Our squadron had several detachments. We did H-46 cargo sling work off of cargo ships back to the carrier with parts and supplies and so forth. That was one of our missions, but that wasn't mine. Mine was one specific mission designated. We were designated by the Navy to be a combat search and rescue squadron. Our job was to pick up downed aviators. We had about 4 or 5 HH-3s aboard the carrier at one time, and that is an armor-plated with guns on board. It has a minigun and a 50 cal gun capable, and we had a special hoist on board, and we were arm-plated. It would take a big round to go through that stuff. So we felt pretty, secure in that helicopter.
Tell us what the nickname of the call sign Big Mother is.
Big Mother is because of the size of the helicopter. It's a large helicopter. It's used for multiple missions in the Navy. This particular one was for S.A.R, and it's S.A.R because they put a lot of armor plating on them, guns on it, and some captain or an admiral was on board the carrier when we first arrived in 1967. That was 3 years before I got there, and he nicknamed it and says, "Look at those Big Mothers," and it stuck, and that became our sign. This is what we became. We were the Big Mothers, and it stuck with us. And our smaller detachments, the H2s, they were little Clementines that operated off small cruisers. They had a small hangar that they could actually fit on board, and they are a part of that ship's crew. In other words, they take off from wherever, QB, with the helicopter on that cruiser, and they man from that station. They'll drive in close to North Vietnam, and they'll depart from there to go pick up make a rescue. Whereas in the aircraft carrier, we launched out and went up to that general area where those smaller cruise ships are, small cruisers are, and we would usually pick up some fuel if we needed. If we could land on them, we would land and get fuel. If we weren't, if they didn't have the deck space to get us on board, then we would HIFR, which is helicopter in-flight refueling, and we refueled for the mission. And then we would be positioned to position ourselves off the coast of North Vietnam, waiting for the strike to take place. That's right, we knew when strikes were going, and if they wanted us to be positioned, they would position us off the coast and we'd orbit out there or be on a small deck and sit there, wait, and so forth. So it depends on the mission. Some Air Force, for example, we didn't know what their mission was, but Air Force would get involved as well because they would be over North Vietnam and get shot, but they knew that if they went to the water, then we would be out there. And so I picked up a couple of Air Force guys before, Marines and Air Force before. So they know that's where the safe place is to try to make it there if they can, and that's what we did. But yeah, if you were too close to land, shore guns would come after you. And they have a limited range of a couple of miles, but they would certainly make it difficult for you. And so that was one of them. The other one was the junks that were out there. These big fishing boats, we call them junks. They were fishermen, but they North Vietnamese. They were fishermen, but they were also North Vietnamese, and the North Vietnamese paid them big money if they picked up a pilot. So that was something we had to deal with, and we would have to scare them off with our guns to make sure that they stayed away from picking up our pilot. We just wanted to make sure that they didn't pick our pilot up, because I couldn't shoot the ship up if our pilot was on board that junk. We would, possibly kill him. So we couldn't. We were out of the game at that point. So we had to be careful there. The air wing is talking to the carrier, and they're saying, I'm feet wet, coming inbound for landing or whatever. But if you hear a beeper go off, somebody's hit. His airplane is right. He's parachuted down, and he's now squawking on a radio, and so so his wingman will obviously follow him down. We'll take him down to where he's at in the water, in his position, get a lock on. They'll lock on his wingman and say, I'm overhead, and what the status is in a situation. I see him on the water, he's in a raft, or he's still floating down, or whatever, and he'll stay around. Now, if he has to leave because of fuel or whatever the case will, he'll be replaced by someone else to take over and be what's called rest cap. Rest cap is another jet that's in there to provide some cover for him, or guide us in, talk to the ship. They have a lot of different responsibilities. So typically you're probably within an hour, half an hour to an hour to locate this guy. Sometimes you don't see him right away because he doesn't pop you smoke until he's directed by his overhead wingman to say, okay, Big Mother's mile out, he's looking for your smoke, pop a smoke, and then that'll pinpoint him as well. So it's a process you go through, and like I said, everyone's just a little bit different. Some go real smooth, others don't go as smooth as you would like, but it all worked out. We didn't lose anybody, and we completed our jobs, and we were fortunate. To be this is 50 years ago, okay, over 50 years ago. We're talking about that we flew very basic helicopters. It's not the ones that I trained in years later. It's the ones that you hand flew, and you didn't push a button and go to the water and hover automatically over the people. And later on, they have helicopters that you pass the controls back to the crewman in the back, and he has a little joystick, and he just hovers the aircraft over and does the operation, and then passes it back to me, and let's go. One of those things. Well, we didn't have that. So, yeah, it was pretty crude, but it took a lot of training. But the training we didn't get was we didn't jeopardize at night losing an aircraft and people. It wasn't worth the risk. Okay, you just had to go out and do it if that's the call. And given that your location made a difference. If you're close to shore, you obviously don't want to have all your lights on and letting the enemy see you and come out with a patrol boat and pick this guy up and get in a firefight with him. So you avoid that, and you go in, and what we used in that night rescue of mine in November of 1972, when I picked up Wayne Lotsberg. He's an A-7 pilot. He was in the water, and as I got closer, his wingman says he's about a mile on your nose there, and I said, okay, have him pop a smoke, and we saw it, and I made an approach, and he dropped a paraflare. Now, a paraflare is like a giant Roman candle, and it illuminates the area very nicely. Okay, well, this A-7 guy was popping them way before we got there, and he ran out of paraflares. Well, unfortunately, he had run out of them at the very worst time for me, was when I had already established a hover. I could see my survivor. We got up to him. We dropped the swimmer down by hoist. He doesn't jump at night. He goes down by hoist. We put him in the water. We back up. I listen to the crewman in the back. He says he's in the water. Back up left. He just directs me back, and I'm keeping my eye on him. Things are looking good. My co-pilot's monitoring the gauges. He's looking at a lot of different things and listening. And he's in that video. Mike Echtel was my co-pilot, so he's trying to keep me out of trouble. And things were going real well. I thought, man, this is going smooth, better. This is my first night rescue, my only one. So I said, geez, this is working out real well, So about that time, the wingman overhead said, "Big Mother, that's my last paraflare." And about that time, about 3 seconds later, it gets real black. Well, my lights are all off, okay? I'm trying to come into the cockpit and establish a hover, and I'm moving the controls with too large of movements, and it's starting to get out of control. And what I didn't realize is that as I'm moving around trying to establish a hover and listening to the guy in the back, I'm backing down. And when you back down, you're only 40 feet above the water, and the helicopter's, 50 or 60 feet, so if you drop your tail down, you're getting real close to the water. And fortunately, my co-pilot, Mike Echtel, said, "Altitude," he starts screaming, "Altitude, altitude," because he saw less than 10 feet on the readout, and that's above the water. And so as soon as I heard that, I just started pulling collective. He started pulling collective, and away we went. We got to get away from the water and get ourselves safe again.
Was in the water?
Yeah, we left him there, and nothing I could do at that point, so we weren't attached to him. We couldn't take him with us. So after I got up to about 200 feet, I talked to his wingman, and I told him, we got vertigo when you lost it. Well, I lost that paraflare. You don't have it anymore, right? He says, "No." He says, "Well, we're going to have to come back around." And so I flew around a while. I got my wits about being stabilized, and we came back around and turned all the lights on. I could turn on the outside of the helicopter, and we looked like, we could see again. And now the reports are that the patrol boats are coming out. So, now that adds a little more pressure to the situation. So I said, "All right, let's get this done." So we came in there, and it wasn't pretty, but we did get him aboard, and took him back to one of the small cruisers and dropped him off. That was one hell of a night, I'll tell you. One of the unique things in a combat S.A.R. situation is that the first crewman will wrap the cable around and make a big loop of about 100 feet. It's a 200-foot cable, so he'll put about 100 feet around and hold on to it, so that when we get into the helicopter, it gets down to the water and we start flaring, and when we get down, our target is to be within 50 feet of him and 10 feet above the water. First thing we got to do is that we got to get the swimmer in the water. See? So he's just directing me in to get him close, and so we get in there close. I do a 10 and 10. I drop the swimmer. He jumps out, and then we go back around, and now the cable's ready to be deployed. Okay, so because he's going to pick up 2 guys on this cable. Now 2 guys are 200 pounds each, so with all their gear and everything, so that's 400 pounds. And over time, when you start wrapping these cables up, they can kink. Well, we've had some cables break. Fortunately, they were noticed by crewmen when they're pre-flighting the machine and their equipment. They notice a kink, and they'd have to change them out at night when we're having maintenance. Well, I was flying my first line period. I was flying with a senior captain. We call them hacks, helicopter aircraft commanders. I was a junior guy, and I'm learning the ropes and learning what to do. And he says, "Jim, we've had a lot of breaks in cables and things that are happening, kinks." And he says, "Here's what I suggest you do." And he says, when you have to leave and they're dangling down below you, and you're coming up with a high-speed hoist, and they're coming up, at the time, look in your mirror outside. You got a mirror just outside the window there. Look in the mirror, and if you see them come to the cargo door, and the first crewman is getting ready to grab them, he's going to try to pull them in, okay? Just bank left a little bit. Do a little bit of left turn, and it's going to help him pull them in to the helicopter, and they'll kind of come in with him. And I said, "Well, that makes sense." So I said, okay. So nothing happened for months later, and all of a sudden I get a call, and it was my first rescue with this guy, and we were under fire, and I don't know why it hit me, but when we took off, and these guys are down below, and I said, like somebody talked in my head and said, "Jim, don't forget, bank left." Okay, I don't know why I did, but I banked left. He grabs them, pulls them, and the cable snaps, and they tumbled into the aircraft. They hit in the back of the aircraft. I felt them when they fell in. I looked back and I said, "What the hell happened?" And the first crewman said, "The cable broke." I said, "Everybody on board?" He said, "Yeah, they're all here. Thank God." Well, the guy I picked up was the commanding officer of one of the VA outfits, and he comes walking up, and he says, had a big grin on his face, and he says, "That was close." I said, "I know, you're lucky, very lucky." You guys says, "We didn't get hit by the shore guns, and the cable snapped at the right." I banked left, so you fell in. I said, I couldn't believe it. So that was a good thing for me. I look back in the job that I accomplished while I was there, and I was proud of being a part of that unit because we had a certain mission that was critical to saving lives, and that's what we did. And it was a team effort, 147 pickups from our squadron over 7 years. You spread it out, and every one of them was unique in its own way. And I was just glad. I didn't appreciate it as much as I do today, because you look back at it and it was a job you did and you were trained to do it. You just did it, But then the more you get it, you talk about it and you think about it, and you run into friends that you met. And matter of fact, 3 of the guys I've rescued, we get together occasionally. And one's in Jacksonville, one's up at Ocala, and so forth. And we have a little mini reunion getting together. So it's rewarding that way. And a lot of people don't even know who HC-7 was, and what we did, and the mission we did, and so forth. And I've enjoyed talking about it, because I'm proud of the guys and proud of the unit and everything else. It went very well.